Good morning, it's Charlene SanJenko and some women from Powerhouse welcoming you to another Gather for Her conversation. Just wanted to thank you for being with us and choosing to be with us this morning. Had a few more people signing up yesterday after we talked about what our topic was going to be for today's conversation. And I want to acknowledge this morning with gratitude that I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the Squamish First Nation. And I want to encourage each of us to just take a nice deep breath, get comfortable, choose to be here now, and acknowledge the lands on which you call home. I'm grateful this morning to gather with three of my very closest friends and colleagues. Our host, Christina Benty, is here with us again today, and we're having a lot of fun creating these Gather for Her conversations. Our story tracker, Tina Overbury, and our virtual graphic recorder, Sharon Marshall, is here as well this morning. So we're all welcoming you. We're just going to give folks a couple more minutes to jump on board here, but I'll take this time to just tell you a little bit about the idea around Gather for Her, where we have gone and where we're going. Then we'll introduce today's conversation. Gather for Her is basically an opportunity that we developed kind of on the fly in response to what we felt was needed, and tends to be how Powerhouse operates. It's an opportunity to speak with women leaders who are leading, coping, being, thriving, surviving right now through all of the interesting times and the uncertain times, the reimaginative times in which we're living. So we kicked things off speaking with Jeanne Guilfoy in finance. And we then had a conversation in and around community leadership and politics. We talked with Jessica Hill. And then we had a conversation last week about health, public health, soul health, taking care of ourselves with Dr. Miriam. So today I am welcoming this conversation, and it's just honestly with our core team. And we're going to, Christina, maybe I'll let you introduce the conversation this morning and kick it off to you a little bit.
Absolutely. So good morning, everyone, and happy Earth Day. And never before, at least in my lifetime, has Earth Day actually meant so much. And so pausing to recognize this day, not only the lands that the territories that we're in, but the fact that it's Earth Day and that we're having a global experience right across the earth. And so recognizing the significance of this day, I think, is really important. So as Shar indicated, we had a number of conversations. And the cool thing about those conversations is that you never know where they're going to go, right? We start with the theme about reclaiming the human spirit. And as we get into the conversation with each person, it's like, you don't know where it's going to go. And so you just follow the trail. And of course, that's the magic of the work that takes place and the richness of the conversation. So I think where I wanted to start today was actually just the three of us having a conversation about what does it mean. What does the human spirit actually mean to you? And I can certainly share what it means to me, but and how I've been contemplating it. But it'd be super cool to hear from you when we talk about reclaiming the human spirit. What does it mean to be reclaiming the human spirit, and what is the human spirit? So Char, maybe if you want to jump in for a moment.
Well, I'm curious to hear your definitions as well, but I'll jump in, and all of this, of course, is pretty unrehearsed. It's going to be off the cuff, but as you know, exploring the fullest capacity of why we're here and what we're here to do in life has been probably my biggest question and my biggest exploration ever since I can remember. And so I think just in a comparison, for me, the human spirit is absolutely untapped potential of what it means to truly be a human being. So we've kind of really explored our physicality, our human body, and we've definitely nailed human doing, right? Mm-hmm. So we know we have taken sport, we've taken health and science. We know every single molecule, muscle, ligament, tendon in our body, and how to get the very most out of that through nutrition and health and training. And then there's this whole other piece of us that is not related. It dances with our physicality, but it isn't our physicality. It's our spirit. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of that vague fogginess that, until you dive deep into it, you try to push it aside because we can't put our finger on it. So if we can't put our finger on it, we can't prove it to the nth degree. It must not exist because we're very physical beings, and we need to be able to put our arms around it to embrace it fully. So maybe that's where I'll start. I honestly believe that we've held ourselves back from the fullest experience of what it means to be a human being, because we've denied that exploration of our human spirit. So I know you both know that I think we operate at about 15% of what we are truly, truly capable of. And I think if we would explore our spirit like we have our body and our physicality and what it means to truly dive into that, that's how we unlock that other, yeah.
So what keeps us from doing that? Like I have my own answer, but I'm super curious to hear, what do you think keeps us from doing that?
I think it's just our own limiting beliefs, where we so need to see something right in front of us with our own two eyes to fully believe that it's real. And so anything that does not meet that criteria is put into a category called woo-woo and saved for those who are not, like, honestly taking life seriously and taking it by the, so it has, you're put in a camp of one or the other. And I'm saying that, in fact, to be the strongest, most solid, grounded, effective, powerful leader marching into the future, we need to marry the two. And there are no longer two camps of physical and spiritual beings. There's just the one. And that's really what redefining the power of Powerhouse is looking at. That's it. Yeah.
So I'm going to put Tina on the spot, and just so everyone knows, these are not scripted conversations, and that the best conversations actually happen when they're unscripted and you're just kind of digging in. So Tina, because you are a story tracker, you are a listener, your work, and you're so immersive in the work that you do around listening for the clues, for not only what is being said, but what's not being said. And as a story tracker, and as you think about the role of story and mythology, talk about the role that story plays in in connecting us with our human spirit.
Wow, way deeper than I thought you were going to go. And a really tender and beautiful question. So when I was thinking about what human spirit means to me, I've always said this one thing, and it keeps resurfacing these days when I think about what we're doing, what leading is, and Char's piece about 15%. And it's that what we get for free is all we're called to be. Like, that's it. That's our only assignment. And we came into the world with full potential and as full potential. And reclaiming our human spirit is full permission to bring our whole game. And it's interesting because when I say whole game, we all interpret it like it's a tangible thing, like it's measurable and it has to fit somewhere and it's to move something forward. And it's not that it's not that, but when we can even just get beyond that thinking, that's when we're actually in the land of story. When our human spirit, what we got for free, can live in full story mode, that's where myth comes in. There's a piece of work that I'm really digging into right now around for leaders, this idea of owning our personal myth. And I'm not talking about the hero's journey. Not that isn't in there, but even the hero's journey implies you're a hero at the end. It implies that, and that's our version of what hero means too. Like, story doesn't have a defined interpretation as right or wrong. Story is spirit. Story is full. Story is the free expression of how it lands today. It's why we read sacred texts. It's why we read poetry, because every time we read them, it's why we read Rumi. Every time we read it, something else, another flavor of 31 flavors, another flavor. We can taste another flavor, and that is spirit. It's where freedom lives. It's where allness lives. And so even as a listener, like, the only reason I have a job, if you will, is because we're so locked into definitions. So when people work with me, I'm just listening through the definition to try to bring it around to what is the spirit of that word that's calling to you right now. So does that answer your question? It's a little, it's going to be broad, but it's what did you get for free, and and what keeps us from that is back to Charlene's word. It's capacity, it's allowance, it's trust. It's trust. How might we lead if we led with that for free? Full on.
How might we lead if we led with what we got for free? Which is such an interesting question, because and I know I've talked about this before. Part of what I think I got for free, not what I think I got for free, is actually enthusiasm. And so, right? And so, and enthusiasm and energy. So when I lead, that is how I immerse myself into the experience. And interestingly enough, that brought a little bit of shame, particularly as a woman. Well, I can't appear too enthusiastic or to have too much energy, because that will I won't be taken seriously. And so my attempt to cover that up has been through intellectual rigor. That being said, I have not been able to dampen the intellectual rigor. I still bring it all with enthusiasm and energy. and I will lead with that. And that's actually when I settled with that and stopped carrying a shame story about that aspect of me, I was able to lead freely with that. And so that's a good question. I would encourage everyone who's listening to this conversation, ask yourself that question. What did you get for free? What did you get for free? And one of the questions I actually like to ask people is, what do people thank you for? Write it down. What do people actually say thank you to you for? And if you think about it, it's often things like kindness, or listening, or truth telling, or enthusiasm and energy, or seeing right through the garbage and getting to the gold, right? The diamond. And actually, in many ways, that's actually what the human spirit, reclaiming the human spirit, means to me, is that it's digging into the fact that we have an intrinsic divine spark that lives in each one of us, that diamond, that gold. And when we're, regardless of who we're dealing with, if we can get past that, they may have covered that gold with some garbage and some muck and some poop, but the diamond is there, and that's seeing that's that gold that emerges. That's that diamond that's so beautiful and perfect. And when we look at ourselves, and when we look at one another with the vision to see the diamond of your soul and your spirit, that's such a key place to start. And I, as I was thinking about this conversation, one of the things that I was thinking about, and why this matters at this time, is that we need each other right now more than ever, but we're gonna actually need each other more than ever moving forward. And I was thinking about the importance of how do we, in our systems, make sure that no one's left behind, right? That no one is left. It's really easy to surround those who are grieving, and those who are hurting, and those who are in pain. It's much more difficult to surround ourselves from those who are angry, those who are irritating us, those who are whose agitation is prickly to us. So how do we make sure that we surround those people with that same vision to see the diamond? And that I think is going to be really necessary moving forward. Well, this isn't actually where I thought we were going, but
I think it ties into wellness, where what we're talking about today, right?
Mm-hmm.
But go ahead, Char.
I was listening to a video yesterday that I shared with you guys from Charles Einstein about sacred economics. And one of the things that he touched on that I thought would be relevant to this conversation was just that it was that conversation and where I think, shifting how we define success and what growth really means and feels like to us moving forward. He said something like, what would be the beautiful thing that you would do if you didn't always tie it back to money? What would the beautiful thing, be that you would do if you could, then he also said that the choice is really up to us. And up until this point in time in history, in terms of our potential, we've really just been messing around. That's what he said. And I love that. So I track back to our point about when we can dig into the whole point of wellness at our essence is freedom to be ourselves. If we are in alignment with who it is where we truly are and why we're here, we are lining ourselves up to be fulfilled, content, happy, joyful, and well. As soon as we're in misalignment, we're down the journey of being broken. And so where loved the question I'd love to throw back to you guys is, the reason I think this totally ties into wellness is because it's wellness at its core. What if we approached life and how we lead from a place of fundamental wholeness, from a place of being whole and acting from our gift, acting from where we, what it is we got for free? How might that look differently, individually and collectively moving forward? Like that's because I think where we're at right now, our life as we know it, we've hit the pause button, but it's also given us the chance to decide how we want to emerge out of this. Are we going to emerge trying to fix a bunch of broken systems? Or what will be the lens that we emerge coming out of this? How are we going to be modeling leadership? That's where I'd love to go next, is because it starts with us and it radiates out from there. That's why the conversation's so important.
Yeah, and the starting with us comes back to really fundamentally looking at what do I have control over, and how do I put my energy towards what I have control over? What's my business to deal with, and what's the business of others to deal with, and what's the business of God? God's list, right? And what's that greater piece? So recognizing that your wholeness is actually, your well-being is actually tied up with everybody else's. We're all deeply interconnected, and we can't actually exist alone. We may be able to control. We have control over over how we respond and what we do and how we conduct ourselves in the world. But it's both and. We're also deeply interconnected with everyone else, and our wellness is tied up with one another.
I want to because there's a part of me that wants to challenge you a bit, not really, but a little bit. And it's actually in our, I'm going to say addiction to the word over, control over. And do we actually have control over anything? I have control over whether I drink this coffee. But as we can tell, as we're living in, we don't actually have control over a lot of the things that we are addicted to controlling. And I don't want to go into unpacking that. That's a whole other conversation. I want to circle that back around to the piece of wholeness. So I wonder what it might feel like to say, asking ourselves what, and I don't even know that from is the right word. I'm just trying to move the energy differently. Wholeness doesn't have a dominance. Wholeness doesn't have a over. It has a from or an of or something.
It has a with. It has a with, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, and it might not be the direction you're going, but I think that circles back to your beliefs, your values, and your deeper purpose, which is basically, going back to reclaiming our human spirit. If how you emerge out of something is So for an example, if I wake up in the morning and I can either decide that I'm going to try to have control over my day, and we all know how that goes, or if I am going to if I'm going to co-create with my day, with my day.
Yeah.
And my job, my only job in this co-creation of my day is to enter into it with my values, my beliefs, my deepest sense of purpose, and then all of my physicality is turned on, my senses.
Yeah.
Right? So fully alive and ready to engage in my day. That's that, and then whatever shows up, it's game on.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of control over that sometimes. And when I try to, then it feels like work.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think
like work.
Yeah. Well, and I often think about, okay, we can't necessarily control, like you said, in terms of controlling, we can't control our outward circumstances, but what's the story that I want to tell myself? And what is what wants to happen? And what do I want to get underneath in my experience? And so again, I can't necessarily control, I can't control my outward circumstances, but I can believe that I can do hard things, right? That I can do hard things, and that I can pay attention to my whole self and really identify, what do you need right now? What do I need? I think I need to sit down and drink a cup of tea and wrap myself in a blanket. Or what do I need at this moment? Sometimes I need to go out for a run and move because I'm stuck. Right? I've used up my cognitive ability, and I've tried to power through something, and I'm just like, oh, my body actually needs to move. And so it is that wholeness is a co-creation with self. In what do you need in this moment? Do you need a drink of water? Do you need to phone a friend? Do you need to sit and read? Do you need to move? Do you need to work? Do you need to write? What do I need in this moment? And what do I, it's, that's where the co-creation, that's where the control in some ways we're able to control, is because we get to ask ourselves good questions. We get to be a scientist in our own life and get curious about what our experience is. And I think that what the power of modeling, getting curious about our own experience so that we can provide that support to others, that modeling is really, really important. And then modeling it with one another. And, when, the three of us have done this with each other, right? Honey, what do you need right now? Do you need to go? Do you need to cuddle up in a blanket and just have a cry? Or do you need to go for a run? Do that.
Now, you know what? I mean, here we are. Three of us are friends, right? We have a circle of trust. We've built that. We're women of influence, and we own our power. And we refer to ourselves as a braid. So I just want to name that, because some of the pieces that we're talking about are things that there are people in power, if you will, or leading out there that don't have a braid. And so I think there's even something around wellness, and this goes back to, now this is your genius, right? Around systems. What are the systems that need to be in place to hold, to allow this freedom that you're talking about of the human spirit? Because I'm thinking of like, it's lovely to hear, wrap yourself up in a blanket. We do that. We say that to each other. But if you don't have someone in your life saying, hey, do you got a blanket? What do you need? So I think that's important. And I also think it's really important that if you're on the front line leading, you might not have time for a blanket. but you will have time for a glass of water. So I want to actually ask you, Christina, as a two-term mayor, in your highest impact moments, what do you remember the wellness part, how like integrating that, and or how might it be different now that you've got this braid? If you were mayor now, would it be different for you?
Actually, if I was mayor now, there would be quite a few things that would be different. I think about my, what I've learned actually since I've left office. I've learned a fair amount, but I one of the things I recognized right away is that I would need a tribe. I would need people around me that would hold me to account, and that even if it's just one or two people that I knew had my back and would hold me to account and would ground me when I couldn't ground myself. I needed that, and I made sure that that was something I took responsibility for, because I didn't want to do it alone. And this comes back to what I said earlier, is that how do we surround, how do we make sure nobody's left behind? Mm-hmm. And so when we get back into our systems conversation, this is going to be one of the challenges that government has. One of our observations right now is government has never been so nimble, ever. It's in terms of providing, it's been all hands on deck. And regardless of how this experience will be judged in the future, mm-hmm. and how we dealt with it in the future, you can't argue that it hasn't been all hands on deck in terms of really shifting systems, and because we're in a chaotic system, and the one of the aspects of a chaotic system, like if you look at systems theory, you look at a chaotic system, you have to react rather than respond. Like, you must be in reaction mode in order to meet the needs of those around you, and that's it's like in an emergency, you have to react. And what's going to be really interesting in the future, looking at systems, is when we shift into then the aftermath of reaction. What is going to be how are we going to respond then? Because one of the things that we don't want to do, and this comes back to the conversation around sustainability and stewardship, what we don't want to do is saddle future generations. And we've had these conversations before about the 7th generational thinking. How do we ensure that we don't saddle future generations with decisions, with responses that take them into a completely unsustainable system? Because we're finding our existing systems, at a broad scale, we know we've been living unsustainable for so long. And yeah, that's a whole nother. Really, it's a whole conversation, right? How many of us have been I'm going to say right across the globe, there's a recognition that we're the way we're consuming resources, what we're doing to our land and our water and our air, that it's not sustainable. And we've been sort of living in that awareness that, it's not really sustainable, but I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And now we've been given this opportunity for a full stop. And while we're in the chaotic part, we are dealing with the reactive mode. What is going to then be our responsive mode in the aftermath? And that's where we need to look at how how are our existing systems, how are they serving people, and how are they serving the earth, and what needs to be different?
It's interesting, and one of the reasons that we're kind of digging into this conversation today is this is the very conversation that makes up a large portion of our FireCircle discussion with leaders, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous leaders, next week. And I find it interesting. I just wanted to add to the conversation because one of our panelists for next week that's going to help us kick off the conversation is Deanne Whalen. And as you know, Deanne is a filmmaker who's been biking, hiking, cycling, paddling across the Trans-Canada Trail the past 5 years. And she's been filmmaking and talking with Indigenous peoples. She has been also doing a lot of healing along the journey for the murdered and missing Indigenous women, just respectfully showing respect. And when I touched base with her earlier this week about the FireCircle, speaking of sustainability and systems, she brought it right back to something very simple that I think we can all relate to. And and I feel like she's earned the right to talk about this because spent the last on it. You can't talk about being more in touch with our country on a day-by-day basis at a very personal level. So the system that she talked about and that she encourages us to think about that I gained from the conversation was actually what can we learn from the system of nature. And the 3 points she brought up that I think will be interesting for us to keep in mind as we're coming out of this is nature is constantly adapting. Nature is constantly adapting. It reminds us to be aware of that and also not to be too rigid. Not to be too rigid. You can't hold and try to control things so tightly. And the last thing she said when we spoke was, we can't give in to the shadow. There's the human spirit popping up. You know, when we do go through a dark time, we have to remember that we ultimately come from a place of wholeness, that nature constantly adapts, regenerates, restores, you know, and recreates. And we as humans can't be too rigid in this process. We need to learn from nature. And most importantly, we've got to keep hopeful and positive and not give into the shadow. Learn from it, but not give into it. And I just thought that was really amazing thoughts, you know, from someone who's been in and surrounded not only by Indigenous wisdom, but also by nature for many, many days, many days. And I'm so excited to have her, you know, be part of the conversation and help us kick it off next week. Any thoughts around like that system? What is the system of nature trying to say to us right now, and has literally had to stop us in our tracks to say to us?
Yeah, you know what? I want to pick up on what you said about adaptability. And like I said, our current, you know, our government and our healthcare system and our education system is all having to rapidly adapt. And what's key is that we collectively hold ourselves to account so that these systems don't go back into the rigidity that they have historically come from, right? And if we look at all these systems were designed to serve people, right? That was their people-centric. Government is to provide us services. Healthcare systems provide us services so that we can, again, so that our well-being, that we recognize that our well-being's tied up with one another. What's happened, though, is they have become dinosaurs, and they have become, in a sense, that they have this inability to be, they've created these rigid systems and policies and processes that actually don't serve people, but actually serve the institution. Now, what we've observed is that everything's had to be fluid. Everything's had to be adaptable, like you said, in nature. And so what is really key is that collectively we hold the whole system to account so that it can't return to its rigidity any longer, actually. It must be dynamic, fluid, responsive, which means we're actually looking at in systems is how do we look for emerging solutions and constantly course correct. So instead of, and I in my work I often talk about like don't hide behind a policy. Make sure that the policies and procedures and processes are serving the people that they are designed to serve.
We're gonna call Sharon back up because I think it's such a great time for her to come in. And I'm actually gonna just turn my mic off for a minute. But T, I was wondering if you could reflect a couple thoughts, and I'd love to turn it over to Sharon as well.
Wow. Wow. So there's obviously many layers, but the piece, like when I think of the message, it really sort of dropped in when Christina said, saddling generations by the way we respond. And the word respond, it's like, and respond, adapt. That's what I hear as really, really present, like in terms of the verb, like what do we take from this and act on is that word respond. And then prior to that, it was the context was, I was madly trying to type it in the chat, is whole to whole. So it's like we opened on the conversation of personal wholeness, right? Spiritual, humanity, reclaiming the spirit of our humanity. Like, and when we serve our wholeness, what I suspect is arriving is we will respond differently to broken systems. Because when we have a sense of wholeness within, our eyesight changes. We see wholeness now, or we hear wholeness, and it just organically shifts how we respond. Not to say that we can't build, understandings, but if we just started with being whole, we'll see whole. That's what I hear. Yeah. And the word respond is very, very key in this conversation.
Beautiful, Tina. As always, just wrapping things up in a very delicious way.
Sharon, did you want to reflect your mic? I just turned it back on. Sorry, I think that was me. Did you want to reflect some of what you've heard from your perspective this morning?
Okay, yeah, certainly. We started off by talking about the untapped potential and that we only operated at about 15%. And I agree with you on that one, Charlene. And we talked about our self-limiting beliefs and how we might lead if we led. And that we are a diamond in the rough. And so I found doing this a lot easier for me because I just want to take time to draw. This was such a juicy and meaty conversation that I found that this was going to be easier. And anyways, we talked about wellness equals freedom to be ourselves. And when we're misaligned, we are broken. And so getting back to the systems, so, you talked about the systems being people-centric. And so when we get back to working from our wholeness, then, what I get from it is that we would be more earth-centric. And as an Indigenous woman, we talked about that we are all deeply interconnected, and Indigenous. I believe that we are deeply interconnected, and that that we can co-create with our day, and that it's really to come from your wholeness. It helps to have people around you that come from the same the same space, so that they have your back and can hold you to account and ground you. And we are living in awareness of our unsustainability right now, and so we really need a system shift, and that's what hopefully this big pause that we're in right now is going to help make some changes in our thinking and bring us more together. And that's basically, I can't wait to draw this out, and thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, I want to thank you guys for engaging in this conversation. I'll just go around in a quick circle with any final thoughts. And I think what's present for me right now is just the importance. We have a little phrase about, thinking globally, but acting locally. And so, I've enjoyed starting to build relationships with global, like-minded people who believe in a well-being economy. That's where I need to be globally to help me come at this in our organization and from how we lead and interact from a place of wholeness. And locally, I need to feel like I am involved and participating at a real local level in my community to help build and ignite unity and to give and take, to light that spark and also benefit from the spark. So for me, the whole think global, act local is so present right now. And I just wondered if anybody else had any final thoughts before we wrap today.
Can I'll just quickly add before I run away, that in order to think globally, I think we have to remember to start with ourselves. So, dig deep, spend some time with yourself and figure out how you feel about this whole thing. And then, hopefully you've got some great ideas and you find some like-minded people and let's start, start something really, really good.
Awesome.
Thank you. I'm going to run.
Tina, last minute thoughts?
Yeah, sure. What's really present with me, and it's not like I didn't know this before, but it's really kind of like really come in, is the understanding of the braid and wholeness. And it goes back to one of your Powerhouse's founding principles of we can't do this alone. And while as a thought that makes sense, that can often lead to, well, I'll just network more, right? But the braid is a very different experience. Actually living, like for me, for everyone, I'm going to say, because that's our experience right now, is the gift of the braid and cultivating that. And it takes risk, vulnerability, listening, and it's crucial to wholeness. So I greatly appreciate the two of you and the braid that we are a part of out there. Yeah, that's what's kind of still coming. It's still landing, but the braid is what I'm leaving with today.
Nice. Christina, any final thoughts?
Oh, I have so many, but I will. I'm going to pick up on exactly. I don't want this to end.
her zone of genius. She's like so excited.
I just got started. I'm going to grab two things. One thing that Sharon said and one thing that Tina said, and that is, and I pull it all together. And I loved what Sharon said about dig deep, right? Dig deep and see your own zone of genius, your own diamond. And when you live in that, when you live in what you got for free, that's living in wholeness. And it comes back to what Tina said around risk and vulnerability. Risk, intimacy, right? Intimacy with self, intimacy with those that you need around you that shore you up. Like, you can't do it alone, and that's okay. Whatever made you think that you could. We're all things are, all things are interconnected, and we need to surround one another. And I'm going to come back to no one left behind, but don't leave yourself behind, right? So start with that. Dig deep and don't leave yourself behind.
So great. Thank you so much to both of you, to all the amazing folks that have joined us this morning, and to Sharon. I can't wait to see what our graphic looks like with this conversation. And we hope to see you next week at the FireCircle. And we will be continuing with these great conversations in May and adding to them. So we will continue with Gather for Her in May. And on Wednesdays, and immediately following Gather for Her, we will open up an open conversation with everyone that's in the chat group and who would like to be part of just a weekly Wednesday wisdom gathering. So if you want to be part of an interactive discussion after Gather for Her, we'll keep it open for anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, ever long we feel we need on that day. But we're just going to keep adding to what is building here. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining this morning, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.